Okay, let's get cracking. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to our Tackling Inequality series. Some of you may have been on the previous webinar, which was last month, and this is a pleasure to welcome you back to our second on the role of live sport in delivering meaningful inclusion for disabled sports fans. We have with us Owain Davies, who's the CEO of Level Playing Field. Unfortunately, used to work at Saracens, but we've gotten over that bridge, especially as they're languishing at the bottom of the championship as we speak. And as I say, he's the CEO of Level Playing Field, or I'm going to use LPF just to expedite this introduction, which is the leading campaigning and advisory body for disabled sports fans. And it's a real honour and a privilege for us to be able to get some of his time, especially at the minute, because they've got their weeks of action and are incredibly busy as well. So thank you for your time, Owain. LPF's vision is a world in which all disabled fans can freely access and enjoy live sporting events. So what I want you to do is you listen to this really informative presentation that Owain's going to give us in a second. I've had the opportunity to have a quick look at it beforehand. I want you to think about two things. Firstly, how do we support LPF in achieving their vision? What are the barriers to achieving that vision? And what commitment will you make as an individual today to try and support that? So I've looked at some of the content and I've recognized there's some things we could do better ourselves within Harlequins, and it's really made me think this morning. So how do we achieve this? What are the barriers and what commitment will you make today? So Owain's going to speak for 20, 25, 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have a Q&A bit at the end. So if anybody wants to ask any Q&As, there's a Q&A function within the webinar, so just plonk them there. I'm going to do my best to kind of curate them and then put them to Owain at the end. So Owain, over to you, mate.
Lovely, thank you very much. Firstly, it's an absolute pleasure being a Welshman coming on to an English club's webinar, especially after the emphatic 16-man win a couple of weeks ago. So before, I thought I'd get that in early. Firstly, as Mark said, I've worked in sport for social change for about 17 years or so, and graduated from university and worked at the Saracen Sport Foundation. Worked in special educational needs schools, and now with Level Playing Field. I'm passionate about inclusion at every aspect, and I firmly believe that sport plays a massive part in delivering that change, and also being a beacon for how community should be and how other sectors. Often sport are the innovators in this area, bringing people together and building diversity and sharing that, and it's something that I want to harness and to continue growing. My personal background in working disability and why it's a passion for me is my mother was a personal assistant or a carer for adults with severe autism. And as a family, we'd volunteer every Thursday. As an 8-year-old, we'd go to gateway clubs, which was focused around building inclusion, that meaningful inclusion, and providing respite for parents and personal assistants and carers. And my role primarily during those times as an 8-year-old was to be an absolute annoyance. But my first experience and provided a thirst for inclusion was I was helping doing parachute games with some of the disabled beneficiaries to take part. And I was asked to go and fetch a ball to take part in the games. And as I went over to the locker where the ball was kept, there was this old-fashioned tape recorder there. And I thought it was peculiar, and I picked it up and I put it on the floor, and all I heard was this stamping and someone shouting, "Helen, no!" And the next kind of minute I was on the floor, snot all over the place, tears streaming down. I'd been hit by this 35-year-old woman. I ran off to go and see my mum, and I told her what happened, and she said, "What have you done now?" And then explained, and then she took the opportunity to explain what had actually happened. That this woman, 35 with severe autism, the only way that she could engage in the community was having that support and confidence. And that came from this, for a lot of people, this meaningless piece of old-fashioned technology, the tape recorder. But that gave her confidence in being able to reach out to the community and being safe there. And I threatened that by moving it or by touching it. And that kind of bespoke way that somebody was included in the community then highlighted that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we have to have that consultation to be able to kind of deliver that meaningful engagement and that participation. So as Mark said, Level Playing Field is a charity that represents the views of disabled fans. our vision, as he kind of highlighted, is about removing those barriers that people have a choice to be able to take part in this. We're incredibly fortunate to have a brilliant team of staff who deliver this, who are passionate about what we do and about listening to disabled fans, about their views and opinions. The charity set up 20 years ago with 7 disabled fans sat around the kitchen table talking about their inequality of experience, about going to live sport, or how they were restricted or limited by their sightlines or whatever barriers they faced. And they wanted to create this change. And it came straight from disabled people about their experiences. And the adage that we use is that decisions for disabled people made by disabled people. And that's an important factor that we hold dear and that drives us as an organization. The way we deliver our work is that our first key pillar is for the fans. The most important reason we exist is to deliver the views and match the experiences of disabled fans to clubs to make a difference. And that's important, that way we can harness what it looks like, why there are barriers in place, but equally why it's good as well. So we can have that proactive and constructive discussion. We do that through having regional forums, national forums, setting up disabled supporters associations, and a lot of other elements as well to be able to delivering that fan view and that fan feedback. The next pillar is for the clubs. How can we support clubs so that they can deliver that meaningful inclusion, that engagement? How can we be proactive in doing that so that clubs can be proactive? That we're not waiting for a problem to happen and then fixing it. What can we do to remove those barriers in advance? Our campaigns, as Mark said, we're in the middle of our national campaign, Weeks of Action. Obviously a plug for our Twitter, and for you to go and have a look. You can see kind of what clubs are doing up and down the country to celebrate access and inclusion. We want a strong culture and commitment towards good access and inclusion, and we need to have the positive side at the front as well as kind of highlighting the barriers and the challenges. And lastly, is in this day and age, is knowledge is king. Knowing the granular detail and also the individual experience about going to watch live sport, or why disabled people aren't going to watch live sport. And we'll go into the statistics shortly about why those barriers exist. So wanted to start really about disabled fans' expectations, and from our experience and speaking and listening about that, disabled fans' expectations all really focus to one thing, is about having an enhanced choice. It's about having that opportunity that if you find yourself at a loose end on a Saturday or a Friday night and you want to go and watch live sport, that opportunity exists. And importantly around this is that it's not about special treatment, it's about appropriate treatment. What are the barriers and how can we overcome those? And there are a few myths out there about the fact that it's expensive to be accessible and inclusive for disabled fans, but that's not always the case. There are a lot, and there are a lot of no cost or very minimal cost options and solutions that we can deliver to bring about that access and inclusion. And also focusing on this is that as the point there, the no caveat to access, is that people want to turn up as a family, as a friendship group. They might go to the pub before a game, but they want to come up together, not going through or have to press a bell to enter a particular entrance, or where possible is to come in the same way that it's an integrated experience throughout. And that's the lens that we see things through, and being able to kind of provide that better choice. So how can we help? It's from a level playing field perspective, but I feel that this is a broader element that we can do, is that we want to improve that match day experience. And for that to happen, we need to make sure that disabled fans are heard. And equally in that there's a lot of disabled people who don't go to live sport or attending or events, and we need to know why that's happening as well, and they need to be heard so that we can make those changes and provide more options. For that to happen, clubs need the support, and that's something that we're really proud and passionate being able to support. Apart that, we need to make sure that as an organization we're proactive, we recognize how we can help, and we provide those solutions. So it's decisive decisions, and to share experiences. We, more often than not, clubs have to innovate to deliver that access and inclusion. And as a part of that innovation, the rules or the guidance isn't written yet. And we need to share those experiences so we can have a broader experience across the country, and more disabled people can take part. Our commitment really is, as I said, is to be proactive, to share the information and practices of what's going well, and also when some of the failures occur as well. As the kind of saying, we want to fail quick and to get to the right place, and then to have that enhanced communication. The communication at every level is really important, and we want to make sure that, sorry if you can hear my daughter in the background, is the perils of working from home. So what we want to do is to make sure that our communication at every point is clear, that we have the beginning, that we understand what the barriers are, we deliver the experience, and then we review it as well. And that we can continually build on that feedback loop, that we have that structure so that people can enjoy live sport and those barriers are removed for more people. A really good way to summarize this, and something that we really embody at Level Playing Field and organizations across United Kingdom, is the social model of disability. And summarized really is, it's not the person's disabilities that disables their access in the community, it's how the community is geared up. And I suppose an example of that is that if you provide stairs to enter a building and not having a ramped access, that would be the disabilitating factor, not the person's disability. It's the lack of provision that the service provider, the community, has not provided. And that's where it puts the ownership on the community to deliver this inclusion, not the individual. It replaced the medical model, which focused on the individual. You fix the disabled person's access requirements, and then they'll be able to access the community. But we know that access and inclusion is a diverse factor for a lot of people, for each disabled person. If we use at autism, there's an adage that you have, once you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And it is incredibly diverse, and we need to be aware of that in how we deliver our inclusion. So the barriers follow three key areas: the environmental factors, as the example I've just provided, the organizational element, the policies in place. Example would be what you can or can't bring into the stadium might be a barrier for a disabled fan. And lastly, the attitudes of maybe fellow fans about the kind of the language that is used, maybe about staff or the lack of education around that. And we just need to be in a position where we can continually build on these key areas. So as organizations, perhaps looking at their inclusion, whether it's through recruitment, whether it's about bringing fans into the stadium, it's about being able to use this as a checklist and to see about how are we delivering against environmental factors? Are we delivering against organizational factors or attitudes? So I've just got a sound clip now, and perhaps Mark, you might come in if it doesn't pull through. But this is from Mark Powell, who's a partially sighted Paralympian who works for the RNIB, about his experience about going to watch live sport with his dad, who is blind, and how they supported each other. So only a short video, a soundbite.
I always say, as blind people, we're great pre-planners. And that just doesn't go for actually doing something. It also goes for some of the potential barriers that we may face. But, I have to say, going to the match when there was two of us who were blind and no sighted support, I was dropped off outside Anfield. Then the first challenge is, okay, busy. I need to find our gate. Also would quite fancy getting something to eat. The things, even just to get to that stage, are massive, navigating the crowds, getting to somewhere to eat, actually asking the person behind the counter, can they read the menu? And then potentially looking at you as if to say, are you being lazy or what? The menu's just behind me. Then trying to find the gate in which you want to go into. asking a steward for help who may not quite understand the reason why you're asking for help and may just point rather than direct. We're not even in the stadium yet. There's so many different potential barriers and hurdles that you have to get to before you even get in.
This is Mark's experience of going to watch live sport and how they kind of do it, and it's pulled through from our podcast, which there'll be multiple plugs throughout today. You can go to our website to visit and listen to the Level Playing Field podcast. But Mark's had the opportunity to go and watch live sport and to see the barriers and to take those risks or those challenges. But there's 50% of disabled people who don't take part in live entertainment or sports events, and that's for a diverse range of reasons, whether it's the confidence of going, the lack of information, the fear of abuse, or the physical infrastructure in place. And it's important that we look and recognize why these happen. Some are specifically, maybe within the stadium or in the sports club environment, but actually there's a lot outside of that. The public transport, how we get to the stadium, how we exit the stadium. I think if you use Twickenham Stadium on a match day in pre-COVID times, going to the tube and exiting there is a challenge, but it's an even bigger challenge if you might be a wheelchair user. And these are all barriers that contribute to perhaps disabled people not making the decision on wanting to go and watch live sport. So there are solutions around that, but we can get those by engaging and working with disabled fans about identifying these answers. In recent times, we, as I've mentioned about the knowledge centre and the pillar of work around that, the surveys have been really important. I think everyone's probably had their fill of surveys during the past 12 months about COVID, but these two that we delivered, the first one, the COVID survey way back in June, and the streaming survey in December. It provided us with the data to be able to shape our offering, but also to support clubs about building confidence and building a return for disabled fans as well. It's something that we knew through our forums that fans were concerned, but we wanted to capture that data and be able to share it with clubs. And we had across both surveys, close to 800 respondents on this. And just wanted to focus on the COVID fan survey just briefly, and some of the findings. And of the fans who took part in this COVID one, we had 600 fans. Now, had 79% came from the high risk category. But it's important that we know, or we recognise that not all disabled people are from the high risk category as well. But what we've championed as Level Playing Field for the 20 years is that the importance of live sport in delivering that genuine inclusion is really important. The impact on mental well-being and physical well-being is there for a lot of people to see when we speak to fans as well. But in this survey, it's really crystallized about that, and we have that data that 43% of fans have highlighted that it have a significant impact on their mental well-being, on their mental health. And there's some of the comments kind of allude to just in here. This report is available on our website, the full report and the full findings on that, and I'm happy to share following this webinar also. But what we've seen and about this is that, and as the title of this webinar, the importance of watching live sport can never be underestimated. And we really wanted to demonstrate that and to highlight that. And as a charity, that's our key purpose for what we do. But also watching live sport versus maybe kind of looking at disability inclusion in some areas of participation sport is watching it is in large part is integrated. You're all watching the same activity, you're all taking part in the same activity, wearing the same shirt, supporting and cheering the good moments or crying into your pint on the poor moments. And that's the important side that we need to really harness around that. It brings people together. And it's important that stadia across the country, that they represent and reflect the community that it serves, that it's diverse at all aspects. And that's an important element that we want to capture, and a really good mission that for anyone from any club who's looking to deliver that meaningful inclusion has that at the centre of their plan. So another plug for the Level Playing Field podcast. Here we went to Norwich when we had the brief opening of stadiums in November, December time, and we speak to a personal assistant or a carer about her experiences, the club, and also a fan. So I'll let you listen for a couple of minutes. Obviously, when following this, please go and subscribe and have a look, and give it a 5-star review. That'd be greatly appreciated.
Hello and welcome to the second The Level Playing Field podcast. In this month's episode of the podcast, we turn our attention to the return of fans to stadia.
Certainly going to football on Saturdays, that was my bit of normality. 90 minutes of not thinking, he's got this, that and the other. Then all of a sudden that's cut out and you're at home the whole time, which gives you far too much time to think.
Main thing we've learned is having 2,000 or 1,000 fans in is a lot more work than having 27,000 fans in.
Basically, if I don't do it now, I might not be doing it next week. So it's really important for me to come while I'm still in a position I can come.
You can download and stream the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your other podcasts. Just click the link below. Subscribe now so you don't miss an episode.
This is a really important way that we can share the information and the matchday experiences, and we've really enjoyed the opportunity to do this through our podcasts, and it's something that we're getting some great feedback. We've had some brilliant guests. We've had Tracy Crouch, the former sports minister, in a previous episode, and we've also got in the coming months, we've got Tanny Gray Thompson coming to talk about key topic areas as well. So it's important that we share those experiences and why watching live sport is important to people and what the impact is, so that we can kind of harness that and we can continue to build on good and meaningful inclusion as well. You don't want to hear it again. So as I kind of mentioned about Tracy Crouch, in 2015 she released, or early 2016 released, the Sporting Future Strategy, which obviously highlighted the importance of inclusion. Taking part in sport improves physical well-being, mental well-being, social and community, individual development, and economical development as well. Something we've all probably recognised from taking part in sport. But in this strategy also, they highlighted the importance, which Level Playing Field are fully aware of and been banging the drum of for 20 years, about taking part as a fan. That it's not just a case of something nice to do for 80 minutes or 90 minutes, depending on what sport you watch. It's about being included in your community, that you're doing it all together. And we've had examples where fans with autism, where they've gone to watch sport and they find the small talk or the social discussion is quite difficult and taxing, and maybe when they've been able to kind of just talk about what they see and about sport, it's given their confidence and the ability to kind of then build onto that small talk as well. And sport is an important factor about delivering that inclusion. These are just some examples that we've done in the short space of time, and a lot of clubs will have delivered these in different ways, whether it's about having fan outreach and following the survey. There was obviously a big factor on well-being of fans and the people that we support and represent. So as an organisation, we took the approach to provide that well-being support, and each Monday evening we have the match of the day before, where we talk about the round weekend fixtures, and in a group chat coffee evening, and undoubtedly kind of leads itself onto COVID and vaccinations and whatnot. But it's about bringing people together and talking about sport. We've also done a one-to-one element where we do talking sport, where fans can get in touch and we'll have a one-to-one discussion about certain things. Perhaps in group discussions might not be their cup of tea, but it's something there. And also fans knowing that option is there is they may not take it on board, they may not need it at that time, but knowing that they can turn and have that opportunity to talk is really important. Secondly, we've been looking about the return of fans to stadium. There's a lot of anxieties about returning, but clubs on the whole are doing a really good job in communicating around that. We did a webinar with the Sports Ground Safety Authority back in October, and we'll be building on this again as we look to return soon. And this provided a really good opportunity for clubs and the community and service providers to talk to their beneficiaries and the people who visit their venues about what it will look like. That when we do return, and if it's not right, how do we feed back so that changes can happen? Because we firmly see it as plans done in theory is great, but under pressure with fans in the stadium is obviously a different entity, and we need to be prepared for that and how we can kind of mitigate against those mistakes as well. And just kind of as we coming towards the end, is that just some practical inclusion aspects that clubs are delivering, that whether it's about the physical provisions. We've seen the birth of sensory rooms in recent times and pitch facing sensory rooms, but that might not be an option for every club. But there are more ways that people can support fans with sensory access requirements to be able to come and watch live sport, or how we communicate, understanding that it might be through sign language, it might be through Makaton, variant of sign language, through PECs, or different ways. And clubs are looking and by doing, delivering this service, and they've done this off the back of consultation with their fans and looking about how they can be more integrated, more accessible, and more inclusive. And that's a really important side to build on that communication. We've seen success, and a kind of, I suppose, the process. And when we share with clubs is, well, we first start with that consultation. I've spoken about it a lot, and it's probably the word I've said throughout today. But consultation is a really important way of being able to deliver that meaningful inclusion. Assumptions often are done where there's no insight, but we need to make sure that we have that fan feedback at every stage. When we're delivering our services, is recognizing what we can do, and then also knowing who do we need to buddy up with to be able to deliver that other aspects. We do it regularly with partners, with the RNIB and the Wheelchair Football Association, about delivering some of our services in consultation and in partnership. Then having that clear strategy for change. Where are we at the bottom? Currently our minimum standards, we personally view it as the basement, but we're aiming for Everest, and we want to get there with a clear plan. And the strategy for change is making sure it's a live document. It's a well thumbed and read document that doesn't just sit and gather dust, that it's going to deliver that meaningful change. And then having that ownership, that obviously the person who's going to spearhead it, but also how does everyone buy into it, from the very top of the chief executives at clubs to every aspect, the people actually delivering it on the at the coalface. Is everyone has ownership into delivering this meaningful access and inclusion. Technology is, for a lot of people, have been accelerated during this pandemic and the use of that, but also it's highlighted some significant gaps. It's harnessing this in the right place and in the right way to delivering change. And lastly, what I'd like to say is that this is an evolving process. And that's exciting as well. Disabled people's aspirations are growing as communities catching up and being more inclusive. And we need to recognize that what we do now, in 5 years' time, that might be obsolete, and we need to adapt with the times and just recognize that it changes. And that's really exciting, because a lot of people perhaps on this webinar will be the leaders of this innovation, and we'll do these changes. And we'll see we've seen acceleration towards good access and inclusion from the London Olympics, obviously put the spotlight on it, but we still need to do a heck of a lot more to deliver this meaningful inclusion and for disabled fans. I just wanted to finish on this, is knowing as an organizations, and importantly what we've taken a lot of strength from, is knowing what we're good at, knowing what we can deliver, but knowing where those lines start and stop, so that we can then, when we get to a point where we can't support, or it's not in our skill set, we can work with our partners to defer and to refer. We've seen it in some instances that because people are fearful of maybe not being able to provide that full support, that it stops the conversation. And as we've said throughout, consultation and conversation is really key and really important. And we want to be able to deliver that. So it's kind of knowing what you can do, knowing who your partners are so that you can refer to, just so that that conversation can be really strong and that we can deliver that meaningful change. That's it from me. Thank you very much. Mark, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thank you. Oh, and that was really, really interesting and thought-provoking. Thank you, mate. And I hope everyone else has really enjoyed that discussion. What I'm going to try and do now is, apologies if I'm looking down, if there's been several questions that come in, I'm going to try and group them slightly. One's actually echoed a question I started thinking about myself, and we're going to try and keep it quite tight for everyone. We'll finish at 11:50, so what we'll do is, if there's any further reading and information in this presentation, we'll send all of that out with the recording, so you have access to that. So if I go to this one, because it kind of echoes with the question I was going to ask, and I'll add my bit on in a second. Is there a focus at all on accessibility at lower league grounds, specifically in rugby? And I was going to ask almost, there was a focus you were using stadia, and straight away we'll think, the Stoke, Twickenham, Stamford Bridge, whatever big stadiums there are, and the accessibility issues that may or may not be there. But actually, do you have resources and toolkits available to a grassroots rugby club that can not feel overwhelmed and can just almost go through 5 key points that will be their starting point? And where would people find that?
Yeah, sure. No, this is definitely a really important one, because with the measuring stick that we have, or the closest measuring stick we have at the moment, it's called the Accessible Stadia Guide, which is essentially for Stadium, Twickenham, the Stoop, and other ones. However, it's for a lower league club, it's very, very daunting to see the level of information there. Directly, the answer to that question, yes, we've got a top 10 tips guide that what we'll do, we'll share with this. And importantly, it's about having, just understanding, firstly, what do you have at the club? About the access requirements. One of the things that we see at local clubs, at lower league clubs, we'll see lowered counters at bars, which often is used to where you put your empties, but actually that's obviously access for a wheelchair user or maybe a person of shorter stature to kind of go in and to get their drinks from there, because obviously they're much higher. So it's just being aware of certain things like that as well. How's an accessible toilet? What's its how it works, the main purpose, not having bins in the wrong place so wheelchair users can't transfer, and lots of simple stuff like that, really. So yeah, we've got a top 10 tips guide which we can share, but also just having that open discussion.
Great. And just to make sure I've answered the question for that person, whose name I can't, because they were anonymous, so apologies. Just to make sure I'm kind of covering it, your focus as an organisation, is it really from the top level, the elite leagues, and then hoping that bleeds down, or have you got a bit of a focus across the kind of pyramid, including kind of grassroots community clubs? Yeah,
we've got focus across the whole pyramid. So yeah. Great. So yeah, please get in touch as well if they've got any questions or want support.
Great. Mike O'Regan, nice to see you. Well, not see you, Mike, but nice that you're on here, mate. Hi, Owain. Just wondering what your thoughts were about bringing people into watching sport who might never have attended a live event, i.e. creating new fans as well as accommodating and facilitating existing ones.
Yes, it has to be.
Maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, it's 50%. As I said, the 50% of disabled fans who don't take part in physical or recreational activity. We need to build those barriers into it. Yeah, thoughts on that is firstly to find out why it is. I think there's one part of it's education about, there's probably a historical stigma about watching live sport, perhaps hooliganism, it's raucous, but actually, if we're looking at rugby as an example, it prides itself on those inclusive values about all fans sitting together, etc. So yeah, we need to educate disabled people on that. This is an opportunity and a reality. But we've had cases where it might be a fan with autism who's just very anxious about coming to a game, and actually that's been overcome by having a stadium tour when it's empty. they can see it, and it's a really simple stepping stone way. Or we'll often have it that disability access officers at clubs or the ticket office managers at clubs will have loads of questions from a disabled fan, just kind of, oh, what's it like with this? That real granular level of detail, because disabled people like to plan it to the nth degree just to make sure their access requirements are satisfied. So yeah, so the best way of doing it is reaching out to kind of, you know, groups and disabled people in the community who might not go. And then also is about having a point of contact, a designated point of contact at a club at whatever level, grassroots all the way up to the, you know, to international stadium, where somebody can reach out and to talk about it is really important in delivering that.
Great, and for me, yeah, I mean, creating new fans is a byproduct, but it's about being representative of the community, isn't it? It's about being able to reflect across a number of different measures, and but in this instance, being able to provide disabled fans the same opportunity, you know, which is the whole purpose of Level Playing Field. So, thanks for that, Mike. Another one coming through again from Anonymous. We've got two people with the same name. How has the current Weeks of Action campaign helped to highlight Level Playing Field's message?
It's done well. So we've, over the past 5 or 6 years, we've seen a huge growth in clubs taking part. We use the campaign as an opportunity to celebrate good access and inclusion. And probably going back to Mike's point as well, is that we want fans who are maybe fearful of going or might watch on the TV to transition to going the community and to have that catalyst. It raises the awareness of what's done well, and you know, indirectly the kind of the barriers that some disabled fans face, and some of their stories, but equally it kind of what disabled fans and, you know, get from, you know, being included is really important. As an organization, we're proud of being, you know, led by fans, you know, about their views and about their opinions, and being able to capture that. But this Weeks of Action can just amplify that message about the power of sport and the power of being included has a huge impact on well-being. And that once Level Playing Field in the campaign can, you know, elevates and more people are talking about access and inclusion, then we deliver that meaningful inclusion, that people can be included and be a part of it. And sport plays an integral part in educating society. I firmly believe that, you know, in doing that, and bringing diversity together and supporting underrepresented groups and taking part and breaking down barriers.
Cool, great, thank you. One thing for me, I have to admit, sometimes, and you referenced it actually in terms of Twickenham Station, which I've now come to know over the last few years, that and the accessibility, that can feel overwhelming as an individual. How can I influence TFL? Maybe I can, maybe I should be, but, you know, so could you give us some examples of barriers away from sports stadia that might limit inclusion? I love the one, actually, the example you give about providing a space for autistic people to be able to come in and see the stadium when it's empty and guide them through, and thinking that, so that feels achievable for me selfishly in my role. It feels something we could do fairly easily. So do you have any other kind of examples that might spark the imagination of the rest of the people on the webinar? Yeah,
that's one of my time at Saracens. Apologies for bringing it up.
Sorry, I'm just sorry. I think we're done with time. Time's over.
But one of the things is, you know, the use of, I think often, you know, the times that, you know, foundation, the community trusts and the clubs, you know, perhaps not always the case, but in the past certainly will work in silos, you know, and kind of work in those kind of individual streams, and it's actually kind of recognizing the opportunity that, you know, there's coming together and delivering that meaningful inclusion. Not often in foundation, the community works because we need to, is delivering segregated sessions where, you know, disabled people doing activity together and so forth, but then actually building onto the next level, that progression, and this being a springboard into then coming that integrated aspect of watching live sport together is great. We in particular, a club in League Two in football, they did that. They had they worked with a local autism charity where they had two young boys, or two young men, who really wanted to go, who loved playing football, but just didn't have the confidence to go. And that's where they built a package around being able to come to the stadium when it's quiet, sit in the particular seats, to this level. If you feel anxious, this is a space where you can go, and mapping that out. And it's relatively straightforward and easy to do, as we've spoken about. But also we've seen it for blind and partially sighted fans, about having the meet and greets, where they might be coming to the stadium for the very first time, and we know if they're coming on their own and have an assistance dog, that assistance dog might not know that stadium or know that venue, so they're not trained into maybe doing those particular routes. So having a meet and greet area where a volunteer or steward can kind of come in and guide them to the seat and be able to provide services and support around that as well. So there's a lot of things, and I think importantly from it is, as I said before, is that it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution that we can find, but disabled people are really happy and want to kind of provide those answers as well. If we're not sure about it, it's an absolutely okay thing to do, to ask for that help and to involve disabled people in that decision-making process.
Yeah, and I like the example. I did it in my previous role, but having the PICS board up there, with all the food stalls, or even in your local bar, in the area within, and just it's there. It gives an opportunity for, if somebody does need to use that and to sign or to point at the various different bits, they can do that. And I'd be interested to actually know more about the sensory packs that one of the football clubs deliver, because the viability of having a sensory room, can feel slightly off-putting with the costs and just being able to make it work. But actually, maybe a sensory pack could be something that could be part of the building blocks to that. So perhaps if it's feasible, we could send out some links and some other information for people. I know I'd be interested in that as well. We'll try and send as much as we possibly can to everyone on this webinar. Got another couple of minutes, mate. Just a couple more questions that have come through. What have been some of the best examples of achieving meaningful inclusion?
It's I suppose we've done a video for this week's of action, which we're happy to share, and there's a lot of experiences there. But I think if we were to remove the fact that when you go and watch sport, it's not about a disabled person going to watch sport; it's about fans going to watch it, and that's the primary factor. And I think that's the kind of thing we want to get to, a space where you don't have to think really hard or have to have all these plans in place about access and inclusion. It's just something which is natural, that it's just it just happens in the same breath of, if we're releasing tickets, or anything for fans to come, is that whatever we do for general allocation fans, it happens for everyone, and it's a kind of cross section. And one of the things is that we've seen is that meaningful inclusion is where you see families go together, where families can kind of go and watch live sport. We all want to support the same team. In some households, maybe the opposite teams, but and have those debates. Exactly. And there's arguments around sport, and that's where you see it, that you see the emotive side, where a father and son, or mother and son, or a daughter and father can go and watch a game and to talk about that and get behind something together. But they both, you see it, and it's a great thing to see, where they're wearing the same shirt, and it doesn't necessarily matter. You're not segregated. You're just watching live sport, and the benefits of that are just incredible, because, as I said, it gives people the opportunity to talk about something different.
Thank you. Another interesting one, actually, from Vicky. Hello, Vicky. Hope you're keeping well, mate. Which your previous answer made me think this a little bit as well, and I'm showing my age now, but almost that Kevin Costner Field of Dreams. You can put on this meet and greet and stewards and everything else, but how do you actually ensure you're getting all the members of the community to come to the game? So Vicky's question, so I don't miss any of it, is I'm struggling to get the information to the right communities to tell them about our new disability sports club and how they can get involved. How do we as a club get the right info out to the right group so it's not falling on silent ears? I know we're getting a lot of tumbleweed and not a lot of engagement. Is there information to support social media information or promotion, perhaps? So a few bits in there. Is there any advice? Is it quite literally go to your website and there's some resources and contact there? But
I suppose it's the communication aspect. Yeah, it's really tough. I think the scars of inequality and the scars of inaccessibility are deep, and I think it's about, hundreds of years with disabled people have been seen in some cases as a second-class citizen. We're breaking those barriers down, but those scars for the people who might support disabled people, their view is that those options don't exist. So firstly, we need to be resilient in our offer and kind of continue being consistent with our message. This message, there is an opportunity for this. This is our provision, and keep on banging the drum around that, because eventually the rock will crack and people will start coming to it and recognize that this is an opportunity. So it's being consistent with that message, and also perhaps targeting not only just disabled people, but maybe the personal assistants and carers who might make, for some disabled people, advocate on their behalf. So that's kind of one key aspect. But then also then speaking to your local partners who you might have. There's obviously the Activity Alliance from a participation perspective, who have a bit more of a national spread on what sports groups are going out, but working with certain care or personal assistant charities, which we can provide whatever particular local area that we can do, and to kind of look at different asks that they have through there. But it's knowing what stakeholders are out there, whether it could be with care homes or if it other disability charities, about reaching out with them and going back to that partnership approach as well. Through schools and education. And there's a big factor and it's difficult, and probably Mark, you totally appreciate in the foundation of funding for under 25s is a bit easier to get than for over 25s. And that's a big fear factor for a lot of disabled people. Post that 25 period, the provision just massively drops. And that's kind of where there's a big opportunity to provide those those services and provisions, because it's also a much needed group that require that support as well.
Yeah, and Vicky, I'd say from my point of view, Owain touched on it, reaching out to some of those, if you've got a local mind that's operating in your area, for example, or Scope, those bigger charities that we recognise work with particular groups, and also your council for the voluntary sector. So it'll be either whatever area, CVS, or sometimes they switch around the letters, but they're the umbrella organisation that have links in with local authorities, so should be able to support, which will also access those schools, the SEND schools, and some of the pupil referral units, but also then provide access to those local voluntary organisations that are working with the communities, which are probably more effective, that will get your message out. And just to kind of finish and ensure this question's been fully answered for Vicky. I'm kind of that social media point at the end that she made. Do you have some kind of key messages or support that you could provide that ensures, firstly, we are using the right language, using appropriate language, how we ensure that it's accessible for people in different ways, and taking into account, or maybe we'll send all this information. There's going to be so much information coming through to everyone on the call, but do you have that support available for people, and then can we send it out to them?
Yeah, so from a social media perspective and a language, we're more than happy to be able to provide any guidance and provide that. We have a number of members of staff from our team, our development officers, who'll be able to kind of support with that. So firstly, what I'd say is get in touch about the specific, what you're trying to achieve and what the ask is, and we'll share our details following this. Around that. So yeah, that'll be the main one. From sharing it, we're obviously as an organisation happy to share information that kind of supports further access and inclusion around that, and certainly to signpost to kind of certain partners, as Mark said about, you've kind of got each borough or council or whatever it is will have a kind of the similar kind of groupings of organisations and how it structures, whether it's the private sector or the charitable sector or the council themselves, and we can obviously support with what charities we know of, so you can kind of signpost into that. But also we find is engaging with disabled people that might be already engaged on your programs, or whether it's fans coming to the stadium about doing it as well. Is it a way to kind of so there's a lot of it. We just to obviously on that point, one point that we've seen is setting up working groups that can bring people together. So bringing a working group to be able to shape provision, to be able to kind of to do it, like, it could be people who are not engaged in your provision already that can kind of come in and say, this is what we're trying to achieve, how can we do it, and allow the working group to kind of to shape the offer and to shape how some of the challenges that you're facing as well.
Thank you. Sorry, my dog had a little moment there as my wife came back to the door. Brilliant. Listen, we're at time now, so thank you. Just a question. Thank you, Michael. It's a great session. Thanks, Owain. So the questions asked us to reflect on were, how do we help achieve a world in which all disabled fans can freely access and enjoy live sporting events? So we've started to tease some, we're not going to have the solution in 50 minutes, but we started to tease some of that out and had some great information, and we'll provide some further information about how we can do that, what the barriers are. So we've started to identify some of those, and I think almost being able to pitch it at a level that we feel is accessible for us as individuals to start that process and start supporting that vision. And then the real one is, and this is not, the exam question for you as an individual, is kind of what commitment will you make today to try and support that? So I know I'm going to agitate a little bit internally, and we'll have that the PICS sign up at all our food stalls and for whenever we have crowds back, and try and move things forward. So I've reflected on not pushing this forward enough myself. So there's a few interesting takeaways for me. So what kind of commitment would all the people on this call make themselves to try and make a difference? So Owain, thank you so much for your time, especially in such a busy period. And everyone else, thank you for taking time out of your day. Oh, hang on, we've got one Q&A come through. It's a great session. Thanks ever so much. Lots to think about and looking forward to all of the post-event information too from Alex. So it wasn't a question, thankfully, because we've run out of time. We'll get all that sent through. We'll get the recording sent through and all of that other information. And again, thank you so much, everyone, for taking your time out this morning, and have a lovely day.
Thank you very much.
See you all later. Bye-bye.
Bye now.